super excited to make this video today. I made a really beautiful patch that utilizes some of the idiosyncrasies and features that make the Matriarch such a unique instrument. So the patch is a pad, but it has a generative quality to it. There's a drone that goes underneath the actual notes that you're playing, and on top of it there's this sparkly, shimmery, almost like another sequence. So a few weeks ago I made another video that showed just one patching idea I had to make your sequences more expressive, and that video did much better than a lot of my other videos where I was making patch diagrams and putting them out there. And I've done a lot of thinking about why that video in particular resonated with people more than some of my other videos. I think what it might have to do with is that rather than just giving a diagram, I really explained why I was making the choices that I did. One of the things that I find so interesting about synthesis and patching and how the Matriarch fits into this whole world is that the choices that you make when you're creating your patch are just as important as the choices you make when you're playing the notes. And I really like patches that are playable. And what I mean by that is ones that by tweaking a knob or changing a setting or switching up the patches while a sequence is going or while you're playing can change the sound and direction of the music that you're playing, almost as if it's a new section to the song. So rather than my videos where I showed you a diagram and that patch was sort of static, this one isn't like that. It has movement to it, and as you play with certain settings, you can create whole new sections, even though your sequence might be playing the same notes. So in this patch, I'm going to look specifically at the different VCA modes, the different paraphonic modes. We're going to patch into the stereo delay patch points and use the filter patch points. There's a lot of stuff involved in this patch, a lot of modulation tips. If you're brand new to the Matriarch, I think this is a great introduction. If you're really experienced, hopefully you'll get an idea or two. My other videos have been getting a lot of really positive comments, and I can't even tell you how much I appreciate that. It means the world to me to know that as I'm making these videos, that there are actually people out there watching them and enjoying them. So let me know down in the comment section what you think. All right, so at this point, it's not quite a blank patch because I'm leaving the knobs relatively where they were in the actual patch. So let's just kind of go through that a little bit. So with the 4 oscillators, I have the bottom, and there are some options here too. When I talk about playability, you might change these as you go along. But basically we have 16 feet, 8, 8, and 4, so that it spans a nice octave range. The bottom, we're going to start out with a simple triangle, then saw, then pulse and pulse. Right now my oscillators are turned down. We'll turn those up in a minute. For the filter, it's the filter we're going to change a lot, but I'm putting it just above 50%. You want the resonance on filter 2 to be up a little bit. Envelope is up a little bit and the keyboard tracking's all the way up. Spacing, I have it set down, but that's something, again, we can play with. What's really important with this patch is the VCA mode. And if you don't know what the differences are, basically the amp envelope setting makes it so the amplitude envelope is attached to both VCAs and the filter envelope is just the filter. If we were to put it in split mode, then this would be attached to one VCA and this would be attached to the other VCA, basically the left and right signals. But we want to be able to control the filter envelope and have that different than the VCA envelope. So it's really important that we set it on split envelope. And as far as our envelopes, we want both of them are going to have long release times. The sustain of the filter envelope is going to be very small. The decay is going to be relatively quick. And the attack is going to be relatively quick, as compared at least to the envelope. This is going to be a nice swelling pad, so we want to have the attack fairly long, release is going to be fairly long, and the decay, somewhere in that area. Sustain, of course, you want it up. Since this is a pad, you're going to want to have it in 4-voice mode, so that way each oscillator can go to its each note and we can play chords. And for modulation, I like to have the sawtooth and with the pitch down, and we're going to have pulse width up just above 50% and the cutoff just kind of up there. We're going to use the mod wheel a lot to kind of create some different textures. So that's the basic setup right now. And let's hear what it sounds like. So I'm going to turn up my oscillators. And this is what it sounds like. Actually, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and record a sequence just so when you're recording a sequence with chords, it's really important that we want the lowest oscillator to be on the bass note. So you have to be very deliberate in how you play your chords. If you just kind of punch it down, you could potentially play the first note as, somewhere a note in the middle, and that will be assigned to the first oscillator. And that's not what you want. You want the oscillators assigned to the correct note. So this is how I recorded this sequence. We're going to hit record, and I'm going to be just very, very deliberate about it. So I'm going to play. There's my C minor. Now I'm also going to put in 1, 2, 3 rests. Now I'm going to play the E flat major with the B flat as the bass note. 3 rests. 1, 2, 3. B flat. 1, 2, 3. And we'll go down here for F minor. 1, 2, 3. Now, when we actually play the sequence, it's not going to arpeggiate those chords. It's going to play them all at the same time. But for the C minor, this will be the first oscillator, second, third, fourth. So this is what it will sound like. And the rest. E flat, rest. And here comes the F minor. And then it repeats. So that's what we're going to use. Now let's talk about the patch points. So the first thing, as I mentioned in the intro, is that this pad, what I think makes it so unique is that it has this kind of drone quality underneath the actual pad. And that's why we wanted to really split the envelopes, is because the amplitude is going to be controlling when you actually play, or when the sequence triggers the chords. But we want the filter to also be having its own envelope. And one of the coolest things about the stereo delay patch points and the filter patch points is that this VCA2 can act as its own audio output. So like if you wanted to use this filter with a different instrument, you could go into the VCF2 and come out of the VCF2 and use the filter for that instrument, and it wouldn't impact the rest of the modules in the Matriarch. So it's just one way of you can take this essentially this filter module out of the Matriarch and use it for something else. But what it does when you bring the audio out of here is it's basically bypassing the amp envelope. So the signal's coming from the oscillators into the filter, and then it goes into the amp envelope. But if we pull it out of here and jump over it, then we can create this nice drone. So, and you could do this with either of the VCOs, but I'm going to just use VCO2 because that's the one that we're going to have our resonance up. And I'm going to plug it into the stereo delay in because this is the same thing. If you wanted to just use this delay with a different synth, you could just plug the audio directly into there and it wouldn't utilize any of the other modules of the Matriarch. So we're going to send the signal path through here, skip over the amp envelope, and go right into the delay. And notice as we turn this mix up, the oscillators are still playing the last note that was played because there isn't a gate to shut it off. We've bypassed it. So what I want to do here is actually we're going to plug it into this mult and we're going to send it to both delays because there's a left and right delay. And there you go. So now we have this drone that's going constantly underneath anything else we play. And see, it still rings out. So when you play, we're still having filtering and sending the chords that we're playing through the amp, but this is bypassing it and sending it over here. So there's almost two levels of playing now, and they're going through separate envelopes and they'll have different effects. And you can control how much of it through the mix. So the next thing we want to do is we want to modulate this because it's not really that interesting of a drone. So there's lots of different options for this, but we're going to use this LFO and modulate the stereo delay. Really, I mean, they're all good options and they have different effects. Let's plug out from this LFO into the attenuator so we can control how much it impacts things. And well, it's really interesting to do it into time. So I'm going to start there. That's not where I ultimately ended up, but you might like it, and so I think it's important to show it. So this, I mean, if you notice, whenever you're playing a delay, if you start playing with time, it has a weird effect, and that's how we can modulate it to do that automatically. So that's kind of a cool effect. And create some nice swirls. You'll also notice that as we get more into it and there's some kind of clicking sounds or the sequence that goes on top of it, having it into time creates this kind of rushed slowdown motion. So that's a fun way to play with it. That's my personal preference was to use one of the other modulations. So we could do the mix, which would have the drone kind of come in and out. Let's see what that sounds like. That's kind of cool too. Kind of creates a tremolo effect. And you can even have it self-oscillate. So that's really a fun option. And of course, when you turn the attenuator down, that wave of the LFO becomes slightly less. I personally, for this patch, actually, when I was playing around with it, I would switch sometimes between mix and feedback. But feedback, I think, is a really great place to start. And that will control how much, how long the delays kind of stretch out. So you have the shorter drone and the longer drone. Let's see if we can hear the impact. And you still get a little bit of that vibrato. But it's not quite as dramatic. And I think it's more noticeable when there starts to be other stuff happening too. So I'm going to go ahead and leave it like that for now, but later on we'll play switching it between mix and feedback. All right, so let's switch over to this end. And one thing that's very common that I like to do is to sync up the sequencer rate with the modulation rate. Depends on the song. Sometimes it makes sense to have things modulate at different rates. In this particular one, because there's a pretty set meter with the rests, I think it's nice to have it going at a certain rate. And let's talk a little bit about why I chose sawtooth as opposed to some of the other waveforms for the rate. What I really wanted to shine out was this resonance. When it has a big jump, like at a sawtooth, and then the steady decline, you're going to hear these pings. And when you turn up the modulation rate, it increases the cutoff amount, increases the pulse width, and you can really start hearing these pulsing. And because it's a slow decline, you also will get some of the swirls going on. So let's just hear what that sounds like. So that's a great way to play it too. As you're playing this patch, or as the sequence is going, you can build up some tension and just add another dynamic. Let me hold that. And there's that delay. It sounds awesome. This would be, so listen to how it affects the time. And the mix. So you can create some cool kind of rhythms with it too. Lots of fun ways to play with it. Let's plug that back into the feedback where we started. All right, so that's all going on. Now, one of the other things that you might have heard in the intro is that I was also playing around a lot with the frequency sync. When you enable sync, right now nothing's being synced, and then you can turn these on and off. And what happens is, as you push the first one, Oscillator 2 will sync with Oscillator 1. Oscillator 3 syncs with Oscillator 2. So even if we were to turn that off, this would be syncing with this. And Oscillator 4 syncs with Oscillator 3. So that's how those work. What I mean by sync is that the phase of the waves is syncing up together. So it creates this kind of really cool metallic effect, but it doesn't necessarily change the pitch. So we can get some interesting effects here if we sync. I'm going to sync Oscillator 4 to Oscillator 3. And the reason I'm doing that is I think it creates this nice feedbacky kind of ring modulation at the top that when you turn this up and down as the sequence is playing, it creates a really cool effect. So let's leave it off and I'm going to play the sequence. All right, now I'm going to turn it on And you can already hear. Now watch what happens when I play around with this. Really cool effect. You know, and if you can play with the mix of that, if you wanted it to be a little bit lower down in the mix, you could turn it down. Or even higher in the mix if you want to turn down the others. So already this is sounding really good. It was, I could have just sat around and played with that for a while longer. But I want to show you one more cool trick that I think really pulls this patch together. And that's that sparkly sequence going on the top. And what I'm doing to accomplish that is we're using the sample and hold out. So what sample and hold does is it takes a quick sample of the noise generator, and then it creates this stepped random voltage that you can use to modulate anything. And so here, as I was turning the frequency knob around, it was creating these kind of cool effects. So I know that pitch and frequency, you know, they're correlated. They're not exactly the same things. One's a scientific term, one's a musical term, but they are related. And so if we send it to pitch, it's essentially like turning this frequency knob. And it's coming in stepped voltages. So rather than having this smooth swirl, it's going to jump around. And so it's going to create this effect where it's almost like a random sequence just sitting on the top of the whole thing. So let's hear what that sounds like. So we're going from sample and hold out into the pitch in. I'm going to turn the sequence back on. Here we can turn this down so you can really hear it. And you turn the delay up, it sounds really cool. And, you know, if you want to slow down your rate, you can, or you can speed it up. It's pretty cool. So it sounds great as it is. Let's listen to some reverb. Now, I really also love playing with the frequency knobs. That's a cool effect. Changing the waveforms also, especially in the bass, really can build up some tension. Make it sound a little bit more raw. And I mean, you could keep going more, but man, this just sounds so good. Let's hear what it sounds like if we go in. Just for fun, let's put it into time, see what happens. So it's really cool effects. And that pinging there too, you could also turn it down by turning the resonance down. So I just love how this patch is so playable with just so many different options. And it's just really expressive with that nice sparkly sequence and the two different drones going, the one that's going through the stereo delay, as well as just the chords that are happening. So all in all, I think it's just a really fun patch to play, relax. You can just let it play, or you can mess around with the knobs or change up the notes. It's just really great sounding. But it's also really cool, just to add another layer, if you turn it to unison mode, it still sounds cool with this nice sequence on top. Pretty cool. So even one note being held. Let's hear how the sequence sounds. It's still really awesome. pretty cool stuff. So there you have it. I hope you liked this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and please leave a comment in the comment section. Let me know you're there. Thanks for listening.